My sweet spot is somebody's soul, is helping them to understand that they're a miracle and made in the image of God, and there's nothing wrong with them, and that He loves them, and there's forgiveness and abundance and joy that is not attached, Lori, to this world. Joy is eternal. It supersedes any earthly happenstance, right? And so it is really the joy of my life to get to teach people how to be a joy starter.
Well, welcome to the Found podcast. My name's Lori, and thanks for joining me on this journey of Found. You know, the truth is we find ourselves in Jesus, the one who made us, the one who actually gives us joy and purpose. And that is why I'm doing this thing, because if you've been paying attention or hanging around for a while, I'm sure you're inspired by the stories, the people that we've had on this podcast. And actually, I hope you're even more inspired to discover who you are in Christ and to live that out in your own life. Well, today is actually a powerhouse guest. I'm so thrilled to have Rachel Joy Baribeau in my studio today. I mean, via, technology, we can't sit together, but we met a few weeks back actually on the Perspective TV show that I have the privilege of hosting. And I was just so inspired by Rachel and her story and what she's doing in her life that I just said, please come on the podcast. And she's here today. She is a trailblazer powerhouse of inspiration. She's an award-winning storyteller, author, and founder of, you're going to hear a little about, I'm Changing the Narrative movement. And she's a former national sportscaster. How cool is that? And she's made history as the first female host on Sirius XM, ESPNU, and Rachel's reached many college campuses and countless organizations, and she speaks about leadership and mental health and overcoming personal challenges, including her own experience as a domestic violence survivor. I love her book, Relentless Joy, and you're going to pick up on this joy, even though her middle name is Joy. It's just so real in her life. Finding freedom, passion, and happiness, even when you have to fight for it. I love it. Rachel, welcome to the Found podcast. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And I loved my time with you on the Perspective and love all the people over there. And so we developed a quick rapport on that show. And when you asked me to do the podcast, it was a heck yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Because I know you're writing another book, right?
Yes,
Can you give us a little peek on it?
Yeah. So, so Relentless Joy, to set this up for anybody that's going to read it and pick it up because of your amazing podcast. I wrote it so that you could pick it up and read chapter 17 or chapter 7 or chapter 5. You don't have to read it in any order. You can also, it's built for the busy person that only has maybe 5-10 minutes to read. There are study questions, journaling questions at the end of each chapter. And I fought for that. I fought for the journal space in that. And so in doing that, there were still so many stories that did not make it in the first book. And I said, you know what? This one was so successful. It became a Christian bestseller. I said, you know what? I want to write. There's more of these stories, more of these people, more of this love. And so it's more of the stories. It'll follow that same format, hopefully. And it's all about living and loving on borrowed time, which is a concept that has really come home to roost for me, Lori. I had 4 girlfriends lose husbands last fall. 3 of those unexpected. One was an illness. They knew he was going to go. And having been very, very, intimate and up close to so much grief in my own life, having lost both my parents and a number of other people, the Lord really hit me between the eyeballs. And He said something very, very profound to me. And it was, you have the audacity to live as if you're not on borrowed time. And Lori, I stopped dead in my tracks where I was in my bathroom as soon as I heard Him say it. And I just felt like in a moment's time, all of this stupid fights, stupid things I had, been mad at my husband for in the past or mad at somebody about, the time that I had wasted expelling, negative emotions or being defensive or emotionally reacting. And so I just decided from that moment forward to live as if I'm on borrowed time, because we are. And secondarily, it shaped a book that was already being written, but it took it in a whole nother direction.
Oh man, I love that so much,
Yeah.
Rachel. I think there's so many reasons for us. Everyone needs to read that and actually have that wake up call,
Mhm.
because we can be so arrogant in the way we live our life, as if somehow we're large and in charge. And honestly, girl, I want you to tell my viewers your story,
Yeah.
because I really believe that that's been sort of a lesson that's been, maybe God's been working out in your life.
Yeah.
And that's what we write from. That's what we speak from when we're communicators. So, well, I'm looking forward to that, but take us back. I
Hmm.
love your vulnerability.
Hmm.
I love how you share your story. You and I both know that identity, this
Hmm.
idea really of how we view ourselves, how do we see ourselves,
Hmm.
is formed from a very young age.
Yes.
So I want you to tell us, what happened to you, Rachel? Like, what was your upbringing like? What were some of the challenges that you faced and that actually shaped your identity?
Yeah. So I was raised by a very loving mother. My father adopted me at 18 months old. They told me when I was 5 or 6, and at that time I just didn't care. I was like, oh, let me go back to watching the Smurfs. Like I didn't care. And as the years would pass, I would see shows on adoption, and something would ping in the back of my head. But I thought I looked just like my mom. What are we talking about? And fast forward to about 12 years old, 11, and I'm talking on the phone to my dad. They had gotten a divorce, and he said, "Oh yeah, when you were at a picnic and you were 1, and I first met you." And Lori, the rug got pulled out, I say in the book, from my little soul. I was like, "What?" And I remember going into the bathroom. My mom was in the bathtub, and I said, "Oh, what is this about?" And she said, "You don't remember." And I distinctly remember her eyes clouding over. It's just interesting that you remember that at 11 years old. And she said, "You don't remember? We told you when you were, 5 or 6, David's not your real father." And from that moment forward, what I know now, I did not know then, was that the enemy began an all out attack on my soul, Lori. And I began he inserted words in my vocabulary, in my soul, like bastard, unlovable, unwanted, an accident, a mistake. And while I was on the outside, a very happy, vibrant, loving, mom, on fire for the Lord, taking us to church on Sundays, I was battling this. And so I thought what was fun, drug use and drinking in high school, led to college, and tried hard drugs, and it turned into a 9-year drug addiction, to the point where I was leading a double life. I was a sportscaster on the rise, had been up to ESPN, but by night I was dealing drugs to be able to support my habit. So at that point I was contributing to the delinquency of others, and I knew I had a problem. And I'll say this, in all of that, and all of my iniquity, and all of my guttermost moments, God was there the entire time, saying, not condemning me, convicting me, and saying, my girl, I created you for more than this. This is not what I created you for. Come home to me. And there's actually a chapter in the book called The Prodigal Daughter, because I was very much the prodigal daughter. And as hurtful as it was to me, that period, and to other people that I loved, I'm actually, in the weirdest way, grateful for it, because I can stand in front of addicts or halfway houses or prisons, which I go to all of them, and I can say, I've been there, and there is hope, and there is another side, and his name is Jesus Christ, and he loves you, and he died for you, and he knows the number of hairs on your head, not only the number, but the order, and he knew you before you were knitted in your mother's womb.
Amen to that. When you just told that story, and like, even though I knew it, oh, it just like pains my heart, because it's so often the lie of the enemy that he took what could have been, just a truth, an honest truth.
Yeah.
That you were adopted, that
Yeah.
you had been chosen, actually.
Yes.
That, right? And twisted it.
Yeah.
To form this identity lie in your mind. And then it led you down that dark path.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is true, Rachel? You talk to a lot of, you talk to these big, tough guys, these NHL players and all. And I don't know how tall you are, but when I was at university, I went to university in Nebraska, okay? And it was Cornhusker football.
Yeah.
And I was in some of the classes with these
Yeah.
football players. They're massive.
They're
They're
massive.
huge.
I'm tiny.
Do you not feel intimidated at times in rooms with them?
I know. It's so funny you say that. I'm changing the narrative, and I know we'll get to it later, about 9 years ago. And the first, I'd been covering these teams for so long, but the first time I went in, there's 150, men in the room. And it was, it was intimidating. I was nervous. I was and I talked about purpose, passion, platform, my own experience, domestic violence. And even still, 9 years later, over 100 colleges now, and as you mentioned, in professional sports, prisons, wherever I go, I still get nerves, but I say it's good nerves because I've been praying for their souls months or weeks before I walk into that room. I've been praying for open hearts. I've been praying for people to come receptive and willing, because I have a message. But what I always tell people when they thank me for my message is I say, no, thank you for having an open heart to get it. Because one of the greatest things that can happen, Lori, I see, is when I go in to speak to somebody and they've got their arms crossed and their body language is, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm this, I'm that, I'm over it. And then by the end of it, they're, forward on their knees, eyes wide. And so that is a beautiful posture to me. I used to get upset with people that would sleep through my presentations, or that were tired or fighting sleep. And now I say, I don't know what he or she was battling. I don't know if they had anxiety, depression, a heartbreak, insomnia, missing home, battling something else. And so I don't get mad at them. I just meet people where they are. And funny enough, one more thing, I now call myself a sacred space holder. I don't call myself a speaker anymore, because I invite people to these places of radical vulnerability, Lori, where they can take their mask off and get real. And I'm 5'2", so I'm built close to the ground. So I, like you, probably make these football players and people look even bigger than they are, because, I'm small.
Yeah. But small but mighty, as they say. So is one of the messages then, like, you're seeing these people, I love that, by the way you enter a space, you're on mission, you're doing the purpose and assignment God's given you. And a lot of, your story came out of these lies that you believed about yourself. Yeah. Is that one of your primary messages as you go in to talk to these tough guys? Like, it doesn't matter your size or shape. It's like, if you believe a lie about yourself, it can lead you down the wrong path into actually living out who you actually aren't, not your true identity. Is that the truth in one of your primary messages?
It is the truth. It's woven into my stories. And so what's interesting about that question, and you're such a good interviewer, you go to places that other people don't go, which just shows your talent. It's one of the messages, but what's interesting about my talks is that if you heard me talk 3 months ago, or 6 months ago, or a year ago, they're going to be completely different talks. So for anybody that's listening to your podcast that wants to be a speaker, that wants to write, that wants to do, I'm going to give you a tip right now. I have in my phone, I have a notes app. So Lori, anytime something comes across that is inspiring to me, anytime I bring an orchid back from the dead, I can use that as a teaching method. Like, dead things can live again. My girlfriend said, you are so good about that, about taking ordinary things like the dishes and laundry and making a story about it. So I would say to anybody who wants to be a communicator in any shape or form, keep a notes app in your phone or somewhere. Anytime something hits you, inspires you, put it on that notes app, put a graphic there. And that's where I build these talks from. And that's why I think 9 years later, I'm still being asked into the same places, because 2 of my talks are never the same. Yes, identity is a huge part of what I weave in. So there was a famous football coach named Bobby Bowden, and he passed away, but we were friends, and he was a great Christian. And he said, he had a very Southern accent. He'd say, "Shug, you preaching the Bible without ever preaching the Bible." And I said, "Yes, sir, I do." So some places, they don't really want you to be overtly, speaking about God. And so what I will say is God, or whoever created you. But all of my messaging, Lori, may not have the G word attached to it or the J word attached to it, but it is by, no matter what, right? Sun's going to come up tomorrow. It's faith-based. That is what I'm doing. So identity is a huge part of what I talk about, and that is to do with soul care, loving yourself,
Yeah.
So many of us, Lori, are walking around and we hate ourselves. And I think
Yeah.
that grieves our Father greatly. He created us. I said in the book, he didn't take the day off and go to the heavenly Panera, like he created us. The bread's good. He created
Yeah.
us. And so many of us hate ourselves. And so I do get down to the brass tacks, Lori, of identity, because it took 20 years of me. And I think that also fed my addiction of trying to get people to love me. And I didn't love myself. And so until I went on this journey with Jesus and therapy and lots of study and really studying myself, I began to love myself enough to know when I need therapy, when I need to apologize, when I need to be in timeout, when I'm being a
Yeah.
turd, and also
Yeah.
loving every good part of myself. And so,
Yeah.
yes, long answer and way of saying identity is a core message of what I
Yeah.
teach.
Well, what I heard you say there, Rachel, was the reason why you're really your ministry, your calling, the way you're living out your purpose. And
Yeah.
it's so true. As a communicator and speaker, I've got my app ready. I write down what can be the
Yeah.
most insignificant things, and
Yeah.
somehow it comes out in an illustration or a story. But the truth is, you're living example that we are on a journey of learning and growth.
Yes.
And identity doesn't just all of a sudden one day you wake and go, oh, I know who I am now and I know what to do.
Yeah.
It's actually God invites us, and I do, and you believe this too. We can search in all the wrong places to find out who we are. But when we come back to our Creator, the one who loves us, the Lord Jesus himself, not only can we find out who we were created to be, but then we can go on the journey of discovering it.
Yeah.
And I'm all for therapy and Jesus, because Jesus goes into therapy with us. And sometimes we just got to do the work.
Yes.
You experienced some domestic violence. There was other things that happened in your life that led to really a broken road for you for a while. What do you say to people who have been through some tough things like that? Because you talk about your pain leading to your purpose, and that sounds great, but that doesn't happen overnight either.
It doesn't.
So how did that work out for you, Rachel? How did you find purpose out of some of the painful things that happened to you?
That's a good question. I think at some point, there was a moment for me, Lori, where I looked in the mirror and I realized how bitter I was.
Okay.
And after my mom passed away from cancer, I'd seen somebody else's mom beat cancer. I saw a post on social media. And my initial thought was I was jealous. I was mad that this person's mom beat cancer and my mom didn't. And in truth, my mom did beat cancer. She got her heavenly healing, and I will see her again. As believers, we don't grieve the same way maybe somebody, who doesn't have any belief in God grieves, because they think it's over with, and it's done. We grieve knowing that we will see them again and that they're whole and they're healthy. But there was a moment when I lived in Nashville, and again, one of those pivotal moments where I can remember, and I looked in the mirror and I said, this is not not who you're created to be, Rachel. And I got sick and tired of myself, sick and tired of being bitter. And so what I would say to people that are experiencing loss, trauma, abuse, sadness, first of all, get to a safe place. That's the first thing. Secondarily, I would say you hit the nail on the head. Jesus created great therapists. I think Jesus and therapy. Sometimes I think Jesus, therapy, and medication. Okay. Whatever it takes for you to get healthy in obviously a healthy and positive manner. But the first part of it is acknowledgement. Lori, it's acknowledgement to say I am bitter, I am broken, I am lonely, I am upset, I am acting out in ways, whatever that addiction is. Maybe it's a secret addiction, maybe it's food, maybe it's shopping, maybe it's porn, maybe whatever it is, right? And Nona Jones, another amazing author, said shame is like mold. It grows in the dark. And when you put light on it, and I say the light of Jesus Christ, eradicates shame. And so the first thing that somebody has to do is get real with yourself. You can't get real with anybody else. You have to, and the other thing I think too, I had this conversation recently with somebody, is some people believe that you give it once to God and then magic wand and it's good. Ooh, Lori, you know this. Sometimes you have to give it to God over and over and over and over again.
It's called the journey, right? The journey of growth. We wish we could wave a magic wand.
Yeah.
And I know you shared part of your story when we were last talking about that moment of brokenness for you. You looked in the mirror and you're like, I don't even like myself. And I think you've hit something on the head there, Rachel. And that whole point about getting out of denial. You have to call things what they are. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're just going to keep on the same treadmill, the same. You can't get off unless you get real. Is that what happened to you? You got really honest about your drug addiction. Mm-hmm. You got really honest about your bitterness. Like you wanted to work, not just drugs and use of drugs. We all know all of that is just a coping mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what underneath that matters.
Yes.
And you said bitterness. What else could be underneath that maybe are keeping people stuck? And then their pain actually can't lead to their purpose. It's just leading them down a broken road.
Yeah. Look, I learned this in therapy and it's fantastic. And that is if you'll get curious about your pain, it'll do wonders for you. So the next time a family member triggers you, okay, instead of immediately emotionally reacting, Lori, pause, don't send the text back, don't put the call back. And I challenge you to sit on it for 24 hours because I'm almost positive in almost all situations that you would respond differently in 24 hours than you would in that moment. I am a naturally reactive person. God has taught me through marriage, the beauty, sanctity of marriage and the mirror aspect of your mate making you better, iron sharpens iron, that I am emotionally reactive. And I am working on that in therapy and with Jesus and letting him transform me. But I would say to somebody, you've got to, you mentioned it, you've got to get real about the anger. And so when I talk to men or really anybody, I say, if you're angry, if you'll sit with that for a minute and sit with that anger, and it's hard, right? That wound. And you will say, okay, and there's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but it was something like, I sat with my anger long enough to know she was grief, or she was sadness, or she was isolation, or she was abandonment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a story of a player. This one still gets me today. It was in the early days of I'm Changing the Narrative. So we're talking 2017-ish, 2016 when it started. And he waited till everybody left the room afterwards. And he sat down next to me and he said, Miss Rachel, he said, I know I'm about to get kicked off the football team at this college. He said, I'm the last one in and the first one out. I wear my backpack. I'm checked out. And he said, but what they don't know about me, and this is a trigger warning for your audience, is that my mom was sexually assaulted at the housing complex where we live, and there were people within earshot, and no one helped her. Mm. And he said, I'm just so angry, but I'm sad, I'm hurt, and we just sat there and cried. And finally, I said, baby, you've got to allow me to tell your coach. And in that, then we're going to go get therapy, right? And I'm going to follow up with you and you're going to get therapy. And so finally, after a little bit, he agreed. And I went to the coach and I told him. And he said, Rachel, thank you. He said, because we saw nothing but the anger and we were about to kick him off the football team. That's all we saw. We didn't understand that he was dealing with major trauma. So please, for your listeners, use that story as an example. When somebody acts out around you, I'm not telling you to accept it or to not deal with the consequences. What I'm saying is if you will sit, if you will pray, if you will reflect, if you will try to look beyond the anger, usually there's fear. There's some myriad of emotions that's underneath the anger where we find out it's not really about the anger.
Hey friends, thanks so much for joining me on this journey of Found. Now the podcast, it's an extension, of course, of the book Found. There's a video series. This message of identity and purpose, I just want to share it so that we all know not only who we are, but what God has called us to. And I hope that you're finding it encouraging today. Would you do me a favor? We'd love for more people to be on this journey of Found. Subscribe on the podcast or the YouTube channel, Lori Hartshorn. You can find me at Lori Hartshorn in all places, social media as well. How about maybe make a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Send me your thoughts, your questions. We'll continue the conversation together. But thanks for joining me on this journey of found, and please share it with others. Now back to the conversation. 100%. And, everyone that I talk to, Rachel, I think, even in my own life, I share a lot of my own journey in my book, Found. The truth is you got to dig below some of those surface emotions to know where the wounds are. And, there is a healer, and his name is Jesus.
Yeah.
How did you meet Jesus, Rachel? What was your come-to moment of what's Jesus done in your life, girl?
Let me get my tissue. Everything. He's my Abba Father, my protector, my creator, my best friend, my Papa God, the lover of my soul, my rescuer, my best friend. He's everything. I came to know him at a young age. I remember what I do remember when I was in elementary school getting baptized in somebody's pool out in rural Alabama. But what I remember more than that, so I knew him. And just as a young girl, and grew up in church and all of those things. But I remember going to church camp when I was around the same time that I found out the adoption story, about 11, 12. And I go to church camp down in Florida, and they had an altar call at the end of the service. And Lori, I was holding on to the pew, white knuckling the pew. And I was like, I'm not going, God. Like, I'm not going, I'm good. Yeah. And it was almost as if like one finger at a time came up off the, again, one of those pivotal moments in your life. And I floated down the aisle, and a young Rachel gave her life to Christ, and thus began the greatest love affair of my entire life. And why I'm so passionate about him is I should have been dead 10,000 times over in my addiction. And he saved me, and he saved me for a purpose. And even in that time, Lori, and I wrote about it in the book, I saw him one night in my room. And people might say I'm crazy, but I know it. I saw him, and he didn't have a look on his face that he was like a mad dad. It was a sad dad. It was like, Rachel, I created you for more than this. This is not it, And I've recently done some work. And I think this is super, super pivotal for your audience. I've recently done some work, and you asked about identity at the beginning of the show. I'm a very big believer. Identity can also be summarized in visiting and doing some inner child work, because all really any of us are, Lori, is our 8-year-old self walking around. So if 8-year-old Lori was scared, afraid, left alone, that's going to come out in your everyday relationships and your comings and goings unless you deal with and soothe and sit with little Lori. And so I recently had I don't even really want to call it meditation, prayer. I had an opportunity, and it just came naturally. It wasn't something I was seeking. But in this quiet time, I literally saw myself, Lori, walk into the house where I lived when I was in active addiction. And I saw young Rachel sitting on the couch. And she was sad. She was scared. She was addicted. She was broken, skinny, manipulative. All these things. And I went and sat with her, and I put my arms around her, and I told her that I forgave her. And that there was indeed another side, and there was a new day, and there was hope, and that I no longer was going to carry shame about the decisions that she made and the things that she did. And I tell you, that was a total breakthrough for me. And I've done it with young Rachel, but this was, 27, 28-year-old Rachel in the thick of it. And it was really transformative for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Rachel. I love your vulnerability. And I know that's actually a strength that as you share so vulnerably your journey, then it gives other people permission. But we use the word inner healing.
Yes.
That would actually describe what you have experienced. And I totally affirm that. I think sometimes, we can get in our head about being a follower of Jesus. We say we believe in Jesus. We believe all these things intellectually. But then what does it mean to actually accept Jesus into our heart? Well, so much of it is to allow Jesus to heal our emotions.
Yes.
And our experiences. And I think we've lost something in ministry. I've been a pastor for years, and one of the main ministries that I've been involved in has been deliverance and inner healing. It's just the authority simply that Jesus is more powerful than anything the enemy could ever throw at you.
Yes.
It's all about glory to Jesus, but it's also about the healer Jesus and welcoming into your pain and shame at whatever age and stage. So I want to affirm that journey, that inner healing, and say to people, like, lean into that. And if you can message me and I'll give you some resources and some good trusted people to help you do that. Rachel, I want you to tell them, as you know, what God now has done in your life. This healing has been a journey.
Yeah.
This restoration has been a journey, but it's been part of your purpose.
Yeah.
And tell them what happened when you launched this, I'm changing the narrative. Like this whole movement that's happened. It's kind of crazy, really, but tell us the story and what God has done in your life and continues to do.
Yeah, it's insane, really. I have a business manager, and he reminds me on my tough days, he's like, Rachel, you created a movement from nothing. You saw a need. You were bold enough to go after it. And you created a movement that 9 years later, you're still getting asked in. You're still in demand. You're still getting requests. And so on my worst days, he will remind me, and I love it. The story in the Bible with Moses and Aaron and as they're parting the Red Seas, I had somebody tell me, and, they held their arms up. They held his arms up, when he got tired. And I think it's so important who you surround yourself with. I just wanted to give people that nugget. Surround yourself with people who instead of just saying, you reach out to me if you need something. No, they're perceptive enough to know when something's going on, and they'll reach in to you. And I think it was Desmond Tutu said, we have to stop saying, people falling in the river. We got to go upstream and figure out why they're falling in the first place. And so 9 years ago, I saw a problem in college athletics. Again, it was my pain that spurred it on, Lori. And because I had been through DV and there were people in the house that did not help me. And so I said, well, I can do something about this. And God was like, you're a do something girl. And so August 26, 2016, I was invited to FSU to speak. And I still remember that day. And then now 9 years later, we're 100 plus colleges. I work with LAPD, Customs and Border Patrol, law enforcement in multiple states. I now work in professional sports, but one of the things that I'm most proud of is I work in prisons. I go into maximum security prisons, men's prisons, and halfway houses, and I tell them, I share the good news. I got to go in, Lori, just before Christmas, and it was supposed to be scheduled like earlier in December, and it was the enemy for sure. It had his markings all over it, but the chaplain emailed me and he said, oh no, there's going to be a statewide, emergency power, blah, 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 shutdown at that time. We can't have you in. And I just said, no, I don't accept this, and I said, what's another date? I can't let these men experience Christmas inside of a prison without telling them the good news. And he said, Rachel, the only date is Saturday right before Christmas. And I said, I'm there. I am there. And so I brought the good news. I got them to close their eyes and share. I shared with them what my time in the Garden Tomb in Israel was like. I walked them through that. And the imagination is such a powerful thing. And I walked them through the fact that if there are people that they need to apologize to, that they haven't made things right with, especially whoever they offended against or their family, without expectation of a response, that they need to get their hearts clear, that they need to teach their kids where they went wrong and what happened to them, and no excuses, but just saying, this is how daddy went down this path, and I want you to be better. I don't want you to fall in these pitfalls. And so I got to give an altar call that day. And Lori, 34 men gave their life to Christ.
Oh, praise God.
And I just sat in my car afterwards. And I just cried like a baby.
Yeah.
The best Christmas gift you could ever get or give or be a part of. Yeah.
Absolutely, Rachel. And it's just, you know what? That's when you know God's in something. That's when you know you're in a God-sized assignment. Yeah. There's nothing that you can do. Sure, you can speak, you can communicate. God's given you natural abilities and skills, but that is the power of assignment from
Yes.
God himself, right? So I'm changing the narrative. What does that mean? And what was the issue specifically that you were addressing when you
Yeah.
started that?
Yeah, it started as I'm changing the narrative on myself, on my identity, as you mentioned,
Right.
on finding what sets my soul on fire. So many athletes that happen to start with athletes believe they're only good to play football. And then when their
Mm.
football's done or they're injured, or whatever other sport it is, they're like, "Who am I?" And I'm
Right.
not mad at parents. I'm educating parents that when you tell a young man or a young woman, good pitch, good game, and you don't tell them good soul, good brain, good smarts, you've got a beautiful soul. You're very kind. You're very caring. I appreciate you. Thank you for everything else besides being an athlete. Then inadvertently, they grow up thinking that their identity is in sports. And that's why we're seeing right now the largest suicide rates among athletes, collegiate athletes ever. And it's a scourge.
Wow.
I also believe that there is, look, I'm in the mental health world to push people to help. That's my role. But I also believe that there is a spiritual component to what we're seeing right now. And I believe it's a
Yeah.
scourge and a plague from the enemy. And
Yeah.
I truly believe it. I had a man, Lori, I was doing a mental health game that was two Big Ten teams, football teams. It was going to be televised. It was a big deal. So I was there for a few days getting ready for this game. And a man came up to me afterwards and he said, "Can I speak to you?" And I said, "Sure, sure. What's going on?" And he said, "May I tell you my story?" And I said, "Sure." And again, this very trigger warning. This is a deep, tough story. But he said, I'm sober. And he said, I've been getting help and I've been in treatment and I'm sober. And he said, but a year or so ago, he said, I began to hear voices in my head. And those voices started telling me terrible things about myself and to take myself out of this world. And he said, and that was scary enough. He said, but then very quickly, the voices escalated to, now it would be terrible for you to leave your wife and children when you're going to take yourself out of the world. And you just need to go ahead and do that. And he said it scared him so bad, Lori, that he went and immediately got on his knees, got treatment, got help. And what it taught me is that the enemy is cunning. He's
Oh,
he's
yeah.
not he's going to be defeated. We know that, but he
Yeah.
is cunning. And I believe that what we're seeing right now with this plague of suicide, particularly against men, I believe he and he did it to me. I almost took
Yeah.
myself out of this world, and by the grace of God, I'm here today, Lori.
Yeah.
And so it is so important for me to spread this message. It started again as
Yeah.
Purpose Passion Platform, mine experience of domestic violence, and now it has spread out to joy and soul care and finding what sets your soul on fire and leaving a legacy and
Yes.
serving others and being a king or a queen and boundaries and interpersonal relationships. So it's just metamorphosized, if you will, over the 9 years. And I can't wait to see where it is in another 10 years.
Well, I love it. And boy, you've hit a critical thing on the head there with that lie that when we build our identity around what we do, that what I do is who I am. Well, what happens when you can't do it anymore? I mean, I'm very honest in my own book. I share about, I've been a teacher for like 21 years. I felt God calling me out of it, but like I loved being a teacher. I was Mrs. Hartshorn, the teacher, and when I said yes to God and I stepped out, and that was part of longer story there of our family was kind of falling apart at the time. I had my own kids in addiction. I was so broken. I was now the failed mom. I was the failed teacher. Like, who am I if I put my identity on the roles that I play or the things that I do? Because all of that can come crumbling down.
Yeah.
Everything can be taken away from you. But if you place your identity in the one who loves you and knows you, no one can take that from you. And that is the truth of your story. Rachel, I know we're on a timeline here because you've got a book to write and all of that stuff, but tell us about Joy Starters. Tell us this powerful message of who we're all called to be in Christ.
Yeah, I created the word. It's called a joy start, or a joy starter, and it means somebody who notices joy, spreads joy, and is joy. And that would be you, my friend. And so, since we're on a time crunch today, it just means you'll have to have me back. There'll have to be
That's
a part
right.
two. I'm just manifesting that into the world.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, So I love it. I now, my goal is, as my legacy is to create joy starters all around the country and to teach them to be the person that goes back and speaks the kind word, or is the first to forgive, or is the person who serves in their community. And Lori, there's a difference in serving, and I teach this, or serving in your sweet spot. And I teach people to find their sweet spot to serve in. If I had started I'm Changing the Narrative 8 years ago and it was to benefit Meals on Wheels, I would no longer be doing this. It's not that I don't care about seniors eating, because I do, but it's not my sweet spot. My sweet spot is somebody's soul, is helping them to understand that they're a miracle and made in the image of God, and there's nothing wrong with them, and that he loves them, and there's forgiveness and abundance and joy that is not attached, Lori, to this world, right? Or to circumstances. Happiness is, oh, I'm happy I got the car. Joy is somebody next to you got something that maybe you would have wanted yourself, but you're so dang joyful for them, right? Like you can feel it. You're so happy for them. Joy is eternal. It supersedes any earthly happenstance, right? And so it is really the joy of my life to get to teach people how to be a joy starter.
I just love it, Rachel. And I can't agree with you more about, God's made us all as his image bearers, but we're all uniquely shaped to reflect God in the unique way he's created us.
Yes.
And there is a direct connection between identity, purpose, and joy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And as you, I want you to just, share your final thoughts with us here as you have to go. But tell us, what can someone do right now if they feel they are beat up by the world? They're believing the lies. Maybe they're holding on, and their past and their pain is actually dragging them down. What would you say to them to help them, yes, be a joy starter wherever they are?
Yeah. I would tell them, one, I'm praying for you in this moment in my spirit. As soon as we hang up from this podcast, I'm just going to pause and pray for you, because I know that God uses podcasts. He uses you. He uses me. He uses books. He uses music, birds, rainbows, whales to send us a message. And so there's somebody that's listening to the sound of our voices, Lori, that is feeling that way. So I would say, wherever you are, if you can, drop to your knees, if you can, bow your head and just tell God, look, I've had people come to me over the years, and I've been able to disciple people and shepherd people, and it's been the most beautiful part of my life. And they're like, I don't know how to pray. I don't know. And I said, just talk to him like you would your father. And even your tears sometimes are a language that if you don't even know the words, he understands. He knows your thoughts, right? He knows your soul. And so I would just say to them right now, to people that are listening, talk to your Abba Father. If you've been gone a long time, say, Papa, I've been gone a long time, or I don't know you. I wasn't raised. I don't know you. Will you show yourself to me? I want to live for you. I want to walk with you. Get around somebody, a church, somebody around you who is a believer. We all need somebody up ahead of us and somebody behind us, and ask them, will you guide me? Will you shepherd me? Will you disciple me? Will you send me a Bible verses? I find great sermons, Lori, and I send them out to people left and right. That's how I keep myself going throughout the week, and hopefully it's what people need. And so that's what I would say to them. And also grab the book, because I wrote Relentless Joy exactly for somebody who is feeling the way you're feeling right now.
100%. So I affirm that. And I say, as you're listening to this, as you're viewing it, reach out to us. We really genuinely want to help you and hear from you. And get the book, Relentless Joy. Okay, I got to put my glasses on to read the subtitle, Rachel. But finding freedom, passion, and happiness, even when you have to fight for it. And if you've heard anything today, you've heard from a woman who has had to fight for it. And I think actually we all have to. We can't it doesn't just happen to us. We need to step into what God is calling us to do, who he's calling us to be. We got to fight for our healing. But here's the truth. You don't have to do it on your own, right, Rachel? Jesus is the healer. He is the one who will heal you. Look at what he's done in Rachel's life. Rachel, I can't thank you enough. We will have you back.
Yes.
You're writing the next book.
Yes.
There's more to learn, but I can't thank you enough for the time that you've given us. And I bless you in all that you're doing, my sister. And I just really pray now that as you go, that God will continue to inspire you as you fill that little notepad out, that he will give you the very words of God as a speaker.
Yes. Thank you,
There's
sister.
nothing more powerful than to speak his words, right?
And my final thought,
Yeah.
if anybody aspires to be a speaker, I prep, I pray, I do all of my things. I have my notes. But when I go to speak, no matter where I am, Christian or non-Christian place, overt or, covert, whatever it looks like, I open my mouth and I say, God, you speak through me. Whatever you want to accomplish today, you accomplish it. Your words, not mine. I am merely a vessel. There is somebody in here who needs me, and you speak the words that will speak to their soul.
100%. That is actually the calling of a speaker.
Yeah.
And it's not about you, it's the message that
Yeah.
you have to carry. So bless you as you carry and steward the messages that God gives you. May he just make your path straight. And for those who are watching, I just pray for you now in the name of Jesus for healing, for restoration, for wholeness, that you would step into the true identity of all that God has created you to be. You would live with joy and purpose. Thank you, Rachel, for joining us. You can contact Rachel. I'm going to put all her links in the show notes there.
Yeah.
But Rachel, is there anything specifically you want to say if they want to find you? Where's the best place to go?
Yeah, I love connecting with people on social media. So I'm primarily on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, all of them. But I really love when somebody says, I listened to this podcast with Lori and I loved this. So please connect. Please let me hear from you. And inevitably, there will be somebody that will send a message and say, that was for me. And that's the power of the Holy Spirit.
That's it. Well, if that was for you today, let us know. God bless you. Thank you for joining us on the Found podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Found podcast. I hope you're feeling encouraged and excited to step into everything God has for you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And if today's show encouraged you, please share it with friends and give us a shout out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.